but Google search is still growing. Google are also adapting their experience. They've also introduced AI mode in the UK recently. It's been in the US for a long time. Percentage of traffic with AI inputs, or percentage of searches with AI inputs, has grown massively.
You're listening to Inside Commerce, a weekly e-com strategy, technology and CX focused podcast hosted by experienced digital consultants and re-platform specialists James Gedd and Paul Rogers. Get insights into e-com strategy of leading brands, hear from industry thought leaders and leading tech vendors with practical advice to help you improve your online CX. This episode is sponsored by Shopify, and rather amusingly, we're talking about a big announcement that concerns Shopify this week, which is the impact of like OpenAI checkout and agentic commerce and e-com brands. Unless you are hiding away from LinkedIn, you will have seen a story or a post, comments about this during the week. It's created quite a buzz in social media. And we want to pull apart what this means, the practicalities behind it, and try and dispel some of the hype, because there is a lot of inevitably when big new tech announcements come out, the hype begins. And we want to focus on what this really means, where it's heading, the realities, because nobody knows definitively where agentic commerce ends up in the next 3 to 5 years, although there is a direction of travel. We've got, alongside myself and Paul today, we've got two highly experienced people in the industry who are heavily involved in leading agencies and who put a lot of really useful content out around this kind of like technology evolution on LinkedIn. So first of all, welcome to Chris Marshall, who's co-founder at Onstate, a leading Shopify agency.
Thanks, James. Yeah. Thanks for having us on the podcast. I'm a long time listener, but yeah, first time on here, obviously. Just a little bit about Onstate. We're a Shopify Premier Partner, based up in Leeds. Myself, before starting the business, I worked client side. I was head of e-commerce for a high street fashion retailer. Prior to that, I worked for Sky Sports. And we are, we've worked on a number of platforms over the years. About 5 years ago, we decided to go all in on Shopify, having worked with Magento Salesforce previously. For most of the last couple of years, I've been very preoccupied with the subject of AI. I arrived at it first from a sense of existential dread because, we sell knowledge and we sell code, and all of a sudden there's this technology there which promises to do both. So I was very, very interested when 3.5 first came out to explore it, and I've immersed myself in it, and I think it's really interesting. We're at a very interesting point right now, like with announcements this week about we see AI finally beginning to have an impact on e-commerce, and it's really interesting to ponder and think about where that might go.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks for joining us on the podcast. Glad to have you on, and warm welcome to Liam. Liam's come out. This might be your third podcast now with us, sir. So Liam was previously at Vivant and an independent technology consultant, is now director of innovation at another well-known e-com agency, Visualsoft. So Liam, do you want to give people who might not have come across you a bit of a flavour of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, thanks for having me back on. So I worked with Paul for 5 or so years across. So my background was more Shopify focused, but tech focused essentially. So across a range of platforms, sort of went part-time to focus more on some of the AI and innovation stuff that had been going on in the ecosystem. And then, the last 2 or 3 months, sort of taken that to Visualsoft, who've moved from being their own platform and sort of tech-focused company to being Shopify-only focused. Trying to take what I've learned in those roles and build out a sort of innovation and tech arm within Visualsoft.
Cool. So let's get stuck into this. Before we start recording, we were all talking about the fact that there are always self-interest elements with new tech, trying to push it, trying to, I guess, create buzz that you have to completely change your ways of work, and you need to invest loads. You need to bring in lots of consultants to nail the latest tech and use it within the business. And we always try and urge people not to make knee-jerk reactions, because you can end up burning a lot of money making poor decisions. But we want to challenge that. We want to look at what this announcement means, what the practicality are, what the potential of it is, what the potential issues and weaknesses and limitations are, and where we see this heading. So we'll start with like a general perception of what this announcement means. So Chris, do you want to kick us off? Like, what were your first thoughts when Shopify and OpenAI made the announcement? And we know it's not a secret. We know that this has been worked towards for a while now.
Yeah, and we know that Shopify is very much embracing AI and becoming an AI-centered company. So this is, they've announced a few things this year. There's the catalog API, which basically is a product feed for LLMs, essentially, if we're to distill it down to something very, very simple. There's the knowledge base as well, which is another way for Shopify brands to, Shopify merchants to make content available to inform these decision-making engines. And this sort of closes the loop, really. This is the checkout part of it. I think, it does raise some really interesting questions. Like you say, there's a lot of hype. There's a lot of people out, saying this is it, shopping has changed forever. My personal opinion is that this is, the difficulty is, like, there's lots of hype, but actually behind the hype, there is some very, very useful technology here. So it's trying to find the signal in the noise. My own opinion is that this is an interesting new channel, and it's obviously growing very quickly. By the numbers that, like OpenAI themselves publish, they've looked into how people are using the platform. They've determined that a lot of activity is what they call purchase adjacent. So it's, people researching things. And obviously, they say there's 700 million users on the platform as of July this year. It's an opportunity that can't be ignored. But I think we just need to take a step back and think, it's not everybody's just going to start shopping like this. This is going to be part of the mix along with your existing channels. But I think, as we talk about it, it throws up some really interesting questions about the technology, but also shopper behavior.
Yeah, I like that, the finding the signal in the noise, which I've now adopted for the part of the title of this podcast. But I think that's a great segue, Liam and Paul, you guys to build on that, finding the signal in the noise. I think it's quite a nice way of framing this.
Yeah, I thought I was actually surprised by the amount of hype, just because it feels like there's a few parts of it have already been sort of announced and released in the last few months. So it shouldn't have been that much of a surprise. I think it's really exciting for some of the long-term possibilities that it opens up. So there's a few. So I think the shopping has changed forever. Maybe in the long term, some of the things it opens up is along that route. But in the short term, there's opportunity, but maybe not game-changing opportunity immediately for brands is probably my initial reaction.
Yeah, I think adding to your first point, I think everyone expected this. I think, I'd heard the Shopify integration was coming. I think it makes complete sense for OpenAI to go with Etsy and Shopify to get a level of volume early on. But from what I've heard, they're also talking to all the other platforms. I do think, similarly to TikTok Shop, there's a big advantage with Shopify because of how clean they're I assume, or a lot of people assume it'll be a sales channel. May not be, but if it is, it's a very clean way of managing the integration into ChatGPT versus other platforms where you'll either use a third party or you'll have a more bespoke connector. So I think there is competitive advantage there, but to be honest, I agree, very little. I think everyone expected it, but the bigger thing is the Stripe piece, because there are a lot of rumors that Shopify were going to power the checkout. So I think that's actually the bigger piece. And I thought it could well be Stripe because their checkout solution has been growing massively. It would, I think, be a lot more cost effective than if you were to use someone like Shopify. But I think that's that's probably the bigger piece for me, is the involvement of Stripe and how intertwined Stripe are with all the agentic stuff.
What do Mattel, Victoria Beckham, Sennheiser, and Glossier all have in common? They power their businesses with Shopify. Shopify is the most innovative and scaled commerce platform on the planet. It also happens to have the best converting checkout on the planet. Shopify, powering the future of enterprise commerce. Find out more at shopify.com/enterprise.
I find this really interesting because we've been here before cyclically, haven't we, in e-com, in wider tech industries, about something that's fundamentally going to shift everything forever and change the way people shop. We had it with Web3, metaverse, everyone's going to be shopping in virtual worlds, and everyone, everyone's got to invest massively in blockchain. And we've had all of these, and behind, like Chris, you were saying, behind the noise, there are lots of really good signals and lots of practical use cases. And in certain categories like gaming, it's taken off massively for global premium brands, things like brand placement and branded purchasable items within like specific online communities have worked well, but it's not mass market. It's never got to mass market for many reasons. And that's where my head's at on this is that you fundamentally as an e-com business and leader have to understand the implications of new tech and where it's impacting shopper behavior. But you've got to put a practicality lens on this. Is like how practical is it that it's going to change, you know, a big part of your marketing mix, or is this going to be, is it incremental? Is it substitutional? Is it just experimental for your audience? Because actually the nature of your product means long-term people aren't really going to want to shop in this way because that process is not experiential enough for them to get what they need from a CX point of view to continue purchasing that way. And where my head's at on this is that you've got to have an approach to it, but you don't want to be fundamentally changing everything for it because you don't yet know how seriously your customers are going to take this as a purchase channel.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting from like the point that the sort of penny drop for me about how this could be really useful is about a year ago. I used the ChatGPT app quite a lot and talked to it quite a lot, probably more than I should or did at the time. And I was fixing, my parents had a problem with their home alarm and I was trying to fix it, not doing very well. I had a cable. I took a photo of the cable and I said, is this an Ethernet cable? I mean, I've worked in tech for 20 odd years. I should know what an Ethernet cable looks like. But it was able to say, no, that's not an Ethernet cable. It told me what it was. And at that point, I thought that, there is a really good opportunity, to commercialize this product because, I'm obviously looking for something and it knows what it is. It's got immense utility. That was a much better experience than say, using Google search, for example, to find the answer to the same question. And the fact that, if you could slip a buying opportunity into an experience like that, then that's obviously quite compelling. So the question you asked was a really good question is it additive? Is it incremental or is it a mix? I think it's definitely a mix. People research products. They find products mainly, online through search and social. Now we've got this as well. This is another way they're going to do it. So is it going to take a chunk of that pie? It definitely is, if the numbers are to be believed and it's going to be really interesting when this thing is switched on and people start seeing, sales from ChatGPT start appearing in their orders dashboard in Shopify. But there is potential for it to be additive as well because it does present these commercial opportunities in a really neat way. But I think a lot of that hinges on adoption of things like the ChatGPT app as personal assistants. If people start to use that, and I'm still, I've had my head in this for 2 years. I'm still quite surprised. Even talking to, people in the industry, I think we had a conversation about this a few months ago, Liam, like there was a sense that people were ignoring it. The sort of AI literacy isn't there yet in the general market, I don't think. And it's going to be interesting to see, people have had Siri and Google Assistant for years. Now these things can be a bit more useful and Alexa, are they going to get adoption? And if they do, then obviously this thing could take off quite significantly.
Yeah, and one of the elements that brings up for me is the trust and how people trust new tech when it comes to payments, because product research, product discovery is one thing. Trust in a new tech that's faceless, essentially, that hasn't got, you can't see the people behind it in the same way that you can if you're purchasing from brand. Trust in that as checkout mechanism. I'm intrigued to see what that adoption rate is, and how quickly people switch to the commerce angle versus the discovery angle. So, Liam and Paul, what's your view on whether there will be trust issues for people to adopt agentic commerce rather than like agentic search in greater numbers?
Yeah, I think there will definitely, and there's trust even in answers that, even searching for questions with ChatGPT, there's trust issues in the answers that comes up and that sort of thing. So I think that, whatever the numbers that Chris just gave of the amount of people using ChatGPT, I don't think it's suddenly that amount of people that are ready and willing to actually make purchases via ChatGPT. Having said that, I think it's like balanced by convenience, where immediately if the convenience of buying, the convenience of sort of immediate checkout is such that actually you get over the trust issues quite quickly. I think, I think there's a balance in that there. So I think the uptake immediately is probably slowish as people, like as it becomes a bit of a new norm. But yeah, I think that the potential for just the massive convenience, like saving convenience will, when it does get adopted.
I think from my perspective, so I think there there's always going to be an adoption path, and there's a lot of people that don't want to move onto these solutions, and like a lot of maybe older people as well that just hate AI. So I think that's one factor. But I think one thing that a lot of people are forgetting is that whilst, obviously OpenAI is new, it's a net new solution, obviously growing super fast, but Google search is still growing. Google are also adapting their experience. So like they've obviously introduced AI mode in the UK recently. It's been in the US for a long time. Percentage of traffic with AI inputs, or percentage of searches with AI inputs, is growing massively. And then they're starting to demo now. So yesterday I was watching an experience of basically ads within AI mode. And I think that, Google are also doing a lot in this space. So I think people forget that maybe Google are actually going to create an equivalent experience within search, and also try and obviously build an equivalent kind of relationship with a user. So I think that's, for me, I actually think that's just, or people should be thinking about that a lot more rather than just thinking about ChatGPT, because I think they've already built the commercial nature into their product. I think the other thing that people don't talk about is ChatGPT. When you start to look at product results, like usually they're terrible. In my experience, if you compare the results from Google and ChatGPT, when you're looking for like, products, like ChatGPT is nowhere near as like well educated. And they clearly haven't had that, time and investment into search results, because they're not, driven by ad revenue and everything else that Google have. So I still think, and I think, I don't get me wrong, I think, the level, like the speed that OpenAI are moving at, it's clear they're going to get there. It's clear they're going to play a big part in all of this. But I think the experience of buying there is still not optimized. I think the quality of results is still not optimized. And I think whilst everyone's watching ChatGPT, Google are also making a lot of shifts as well.
I think that's, the quality. I mean, the sheer number of years that Google's had to refine and perfect its algorithm to nail down the quality signals, because those are what drive its revenue, is a massive advantage. The one thing that Google's struggled at historically is nailing down the checkout experience. Google Check has never taken off in the way they wanted to. Google Pay has never landed in the way that Apple Pay did. And the massive issue you're going to have is, how do they get that checkout experience? See, that one of the things that the OpenAI and that Shopify thing, OpenAI done smartly is, you're right, Stripe. Stripe is such a respected global payment network. It's got the payment methods, it's got the diversity of payment options in there. I wonder how Google will make that work as a counterpart.
I think, I was going to say that, this is probably one of the points I was going to raise, that this is exciting. And I think the sort of agentic commerce approach is, again, long-term going to be a direction that takes off, but it's not, ChatGPT is not the be-all and end-all of that. And I think Google, it's like, the trajectory has moved ChatGPT, but that's I don't expect Google just lay down and die and let the numbers completely change. And I think actually over the last 12 or 18 months, if we're looking at the AI space 18 months ago, I'd have said Google probably felt like the one that have dropped the ball, felt like they were running behind against Meta, ChatGPT, some of the others. But over this last 12 or 18 months, have probably come on more than any of the others across the different strands of AI. I think they've done some really good stuff over the last year or so. I would expect that they'll have their own offering for agentic commerce. And I think some of the long-term benefits are when it's, this stuff's natively, voice controlled via the phone. So it's not just ChatGPT app. It's actually, voice control through the phone, is probably the most simple way we could ask to buy something. And when, if Google own 50% of the phones in the UK for, I don't know what the number is, but Google powering a lot of the phones in the UK. They've got the advantage on that side. So yeah, I think it's like just over because of ChatGPT.
The other things at our like town hall event yesterday, Josh did this talk on like where Google's headed, and he showed an example of like essentially how, because I think the way that Google see their experience changing is obviously Google knows a lot about us as an individual, and we've all been using Google for ages. We provide more context to Google, everything else, so they're already in a really good position to kind of provide relevant results. But essentially, Josh's example that was, I think Google must have given him a video or something of like an example. But basically, I type in mountain bike, it immediately then asks me more questions. And then based on a combination of what I'm inputting and what Google already knows about me, it shows like the most relevant possible subset of products. And I think that the potential long-term route would be more of an affiliate model, which is what ChatGPT have said they're going to do. And essentially, you're paying for like the most relevant product, but you're probably paying a percentage of sale. But even if it's not the affiliate model, like I think that's kind of where it will go, where they kind of monetize maybe, slightly differently, like really high purchase intent traffic, like higher than what you would probably see from Google Shopping right now.
Yeah. So the question for brands and retailers then is, how do you appear in that? Because what you just described, that at some point there's still a search happening. Or it's not you typing it into a box on Google, or it's the agent is gathering information from you. And then you see this on some of the reasoning models, you can see the chain of thought and you can see them. And it's really interesting. Like you mentioned trust, like, do I trust the results? Is it, even with that information, is it going to make the best search? What index is it using? Google's got the best relevance, it has done for a long time online. So, you could maybe trust a Google product to do that. But, I see some of the queries they're making on my behalf and I'm thinking, well, I wouldn't search like that because I want this specifically. So ultimately, there is still a search in there, and there's a question of relevance and there's a question of trust. So at some point deep down in the machine, like those old rules from SEO around relevancy and trust still will apply. Because, these aren't looking at the whole internet every time. They've got a finite amount of space in the context windows. They've got to isolate a bunch of products and then make some decisions and recommend some to you. So it's how do you get into that first bit, and then how do you surface in the second bit?
Yeah. Let's drill a bit more into what we think we're going to do with commercial opportunity, and then what do we think the limitations are of where it's at right now purely from the commerce point of view, not from like the research and information angle. But and Chris, you touched on this earlier about you given your Ethernet cable example about how that can be really powerful if you're seeking validation on something specific and then wanting to turn that into a quick purchase option. So what type of purchase are we talking about? Because in my head so far, I'm thinking this doesn't feel remotely premium. And I think, Paul, you alluded to that in one of your posts. I can't imagine like a premium brand like a Chanel going, yeah, it'd be great. I mean, obviously you can't stop people looking for it, but it feels, I can't imagine that the kind of shopper who buys from a premium brand is probably searching for that type of product through theirs. But everyday purchase, like repeat buys, essential, like things like ticketing, I can see working well. What type of product do you think is going to sell well through this?
Yeah.
Let's go to Chris and we'll come back.
Yeah, you go first.
Things like utilities, for example. There's different types of shopping, isn't there? Like, shopping is a leisure activity for lots of people. And, and there's pleasure in the experience, especially when it comes to fashion and, where shopping is, it's like a form of self-expression. It's quite enjoyable, especially, physical retail. But things like, buying utilities, for example, if I can send my agent away and say, look, find me the best, energy deal for my house for the next year. That is something you'll probably happily delegate, and then come back in an hour with the recommendations. And I think you still, there's a lot of talk about people, about these systems making autonomous purchasing decisions. I think we're a way off that. I think you've already touched on trust, and hallucinations and things like that are very much still a factor. And they're not bugs. These are features of the technology. That's one of the reasons why it works so well, is that it sometimes just makes stuff up. That is great if you're using it in a work context, for example, for for brainstorming. But if it's making a decision for a retailer of whether to apply a refund or something, or making a decision on your behalf about whether to buy something, I don't think we're there yet. And I think, we're still going to see like a human in the loop. But I think, there's different types of shopping. And if it can automate away some of the more mundane stuff, then that's probably where it's going to get traction earlier. Sorry, Paul.
No, go on. I think one thing that I was going to say, and Liam, I'll let you answer in a second. But one thing that I was going to say, about a month ago, we basically got a lot of client data sitting in the data warehouse, and I got a data engineer to basically show trends around like where traffic is growing, conversion rate, everything else across like 40 or 50 retailers. And the one that stood out to me, so most of them are tiny volume still, but growing super quickly. And the only products that are getting kind of meaningful traffic are more technical. So it's where essentially people are doing deep research into a product and then discovering, which I think is probably a good use case for ChatGPT at the moment. And the retailer that was getting the most essentially volume of traffic was a very technical music product, or they produce technical music products. So essentially they're doing lots of the users doing lots of research into like specifications, everything else. They're discovering the retail or the manufacturer and the product. They're then going through to the website, and then in my opinion they'll have a lead time, and they'll probably do additional comparison via Google, etc. But I think that's a really interesting one, because I think a lot of people will discover product, they then go through to a website, which obviously a lot of people are predicting will disappear at some point. And that website, is selling visually, they're presenting video content, they're presenting, customer feedback, they're offering finance, payments, everything else. They're offering potential like video consultations, etc. And yeah, I think that's just an interesting thing, because I still think, don't get me wrong, I completely agree with what you're saying. I think a lot of people might, any kind of commodity product or anything that they've had before, or anything else, they might then go to purchase via ChatGPT. I think ChatGPT could take a chunk out of Google Shopping, because, there's a lot of products that I would personally type in Google, find the cheapest one, go to buy quickly. That's a pretty clear use case for it. But yeah, I think the interesting thing is, I think there'll be a lot of discovery via ChatGPT, but I think a lot of that discovery won't purchase via ChatGPT.
I do agree with that. I was thinking about it as, I think maybe Paul, you put something on LinkedIn about like the premium brands and experience. I think short term, like it makes complete sense. The sort of normal, Amazon things that you stick in the cart and buy quickly without thinking about it will be through ChatGPT and the discovery piece. But I think I don't think the website's just going to overnight not be needed. I think there's always going to be brand presence there, and there'll always be use for it. Like maybe the amount of traffic moving through will drop. But then I guess from a premium brand perspective, after the brand, like the value in repeatedly going to the website to buy drops. And I think there's, when you're talking about the video content and image content, like all of that will be pulled into chat. It's maybe not in this first version, but all of that reviews will be summarized and pulled into ChatGPT. All that stuff will be brought in. I think unless it's like a complete unknown for who do you buy? APC, you have a new sweatshirt out. Do you need to go through to the site again to see that? Or if you see that in ChatGPT, is that enough for you to buy? I think there will be a drop in people needing that like brand experience. And then, so like the amount of brands that we've worked with that have done big CRO pieces where they actually sacrifice some of the brand experience to optimize for conversion. Like this is ultimately, instead of the small percentages, potentially doubling your conversion. Like there's a balance again of a brand's going to sacrifice some of that.
I think that's a real interesting challenge here, though, because in parallel discussions, we've had this whole concept of people having invested too much in bottom of the funnel, not enough in top of the funnel, and acquisition at the expense of retention, loyalty. ChatGPT is not a customer experience environment, right? You can't control it. It's basically a completely independent environment. Yes, you can optimize, coming back to like Chris, all of your points earlier about you can structure and optimize your data, right, to get accurate data in there in the first place. And over time, like you were saying, they're inevitably going to enrich the type of data they bring in. But fundamentally, you're doing nothing to engage people and give people a reason to come back. And that would be my concern. Well, it's not a concern, is you can't stop people shopping, but how many people will go, who will be willing to purchase items where there is, I guess, an emotional attachment to that purchase? And clothing, for some people, it's functional. For a lot of people, you're buying into a brand, you're buying into a particular style of feeling when you're purchasing it. Yeah. I'm not yet convinced that that sacrificing the control of experience is a good long-term strategy.
Well, I think some brands might not even want that, experience at all. Like, I think some luxury brands. I agree. I think eventually, like, they'll have to allow for more of an experience via the interface. But I think the interesting, when you go on LinkedIn, everyone's saying, they're going to kill every sales channel. I think the thing that people are naive about is the role of Meta and TikTok in product discovery. And I actually think it's going to be really interesting to see how they evolve, because the opportunity is there for, them to play a bigger role in this as well. And obviously I think there's a stat around, like, people under the age of 25 average 5 hours a day on Instagram over a weekend, something like that. And it's like the opportunity, if, user behavior changes, I personally think, there's more of a role they could play in this whole piece. But yeah, I think it'll be interesting. There's also rumors OpenAI building a TikTok competitor to try.
Well, I was just about to say, did you say, it went under the radar in the LinkedIn noise, I guess, but did you see the Pulse, OpenAI Pulse?
Stole our word.
As well, I know you want to copyright that. That again, so it's not just like trying to take a bite out of Google Ads and Google Shopping. It's like actually trying to take, trying to bring out the platform that's going to take the attention and the doom scrolling, then feed in the transactions into that, and actually being able to, as a daily, if people have used Feedly for years to see what's going on day to day, or Twitter. I guess it's the new Twitter or X now, where actually if they can surface good, relevant content for me day to day, it makes sense as a place to get the attention. And then so yeah, I guess it's also competing with the TikToks and Facebooks, which is interesting.
On the subject of like the future of the website, there's the brand and content experiential side of it as well, but there's also really practical concerns around different types of fulfillment and different types of products. So, for example, a couple of clients that we work with are Abbott Lion, massively, lots and lots of personalized, customized products, which requires deeply complex UI, to visualize and to configure. That is something that marketplaces have never solved. I'm really interested to see that Etsy's launch partner, because Etsy do have quite a lot of personalization going on there. So I'm going to be interested to see how that is handled in ChatGPT. Am I going to get fields where I can write people's names in and things like that? And then the other side of it, so using another example, Mamas and Papas, one of our, multi-channel retail clients, we work very closely with Shopify. And going back to your point about Shopify checkout, Paul, like with the checkout team to make sure that these multi-channel use cases were served, so I can pick up in store, I can pick up from a locker. Now, what is OpenAI's appetite to start to build, to build a proper checkout, so that you can facilitate all of this, because it's no small undertaking. And, we have this problem today with, Apple Pay and Google Pay. If we've got a client who wants to offer anything beyond, standard next day, etc. If they want to offer name day or click and collect or whatever, it's difficult you can't render it in the Apple Pay checkout or the Google Pay checkout. The only kind of universal checkout that has actually moved to solve this is Shopify and Shop Pay, where any customization you build in your Shopify checkout manifests as well in the Shop Pay checkout. So you can you can control it. And I was quite surprised actually, because, brands and retailers are probably going to be looking at, right, what products can I put on here? Right. Well, I can't put my personalized products on here if that's a big thing, because there's no way of configuring them. That example with the Ethernet cable, I probably want to pick that up the same day. Yeah. I want to find somebody near me. So where's the click and collect UI? I'm for the time being, at least, unless OpenAI invest in those kind of UI, I'm going to have to go to the website ultimately.
Yeah, and that's that. I mean, the payment side of you're right. The fulfillment side is exponentially complex, with logic around shipping rate logics around postal code exclusions, any volumetric base that impacts data's got to be sent back from a carrier point of view. Whereas all that logic handled to make sure it doesn't break it, but it's also the payment side of where you've got credit store credits, you've got gift card balances. All different types of nested discounts, and that's the bit I'm really intrigued to see is where is it unable to support it? Because from what I'm understanding at the moment, it's a simple transaction.
So it's a slightly controversial comparison actually. So this is it's going back to one of the points we were talking about a second ago, that all of the brands that we work with look at Amazon and they know that they could drive volume through Amazon, and a proportion of that would be incremental as a result of selling via Amazon, targeting Amazon's user base, being able to, offer Prime in that environment, etc. But they don't do it because there's no loyalty. You're not building a relationship with that customer. You don't have the ability to get them bought into your brand and catalog, as much. You don't have the ability to build their basket value, and you're not kind of entering into that kind of relationship in a brand way. And I guess I personally think in its current form, I know this is going to change as, the agentic side evolves and as users start to, just be more efficient using the agentic stuff. But as of right now, I feel like it's a very similar comparison personally.
Is that a lot of that issue though, is that you don't own the customer at the end? You don't get any of that data through Amazon?
But equally, I think if I completely agree that is the biggest issue of Amazon. But I think even if you did, I still think buying through Amazon, I think often if I buy a brand through Amazon, I guess I already know about the brand, but if I discover and buy a product through Amazon, I'm not as incentivized, I'm not as bought in, I'm not as incentivized to, go back. I haven't learned anything about the brand at any point. I haven't built an experience. I can't be encouraged to download the native app. I can't be encouraged to follow them on Instagram, etc., etc. And I think, don't get me wrong, this will play a part in the same way, all of the other bottom of funnel do in selling someone. But yeah, I think as a brand channel, I just don't think it'll be a primary. It's more like a necessary evil targeting the volume a little bit.
Yeah, I think I agree with some of the concerns there, to be fair. I do agree with that. I think maybe we see more of a shift in different routes, different routes for shopping depending on what people are actually buying, rather than, I guess at the minute, especially via Shopify, whether it's a sofa, whether it's a premium fashion, whether it's whatever shampoo, it's all managed in the same route. And maybe we see a bit more.
Yeah, I guess I still see this very much. The big opportunity for me for brands is more around being visible and being discovered and being the consideration phase to drive the decision-making lower down the funnel, and for simple purchases which don't have complexity around fulfillment, pricing, payment flow, then where it's not a complex consideration, which is I want it now, it's a purchase where I don't need to deliberate on. I think that commercially would work really, really well. But yeah, I struggle to see how anything where I as a consumer have a decision path to go through before I'm ready to make payment. I'd struggle to see how people would commit to purchasing in that environment. And I could be 100% wrong on this, and in the next couple of years, it could fundamentally change. But I think that's where my head is at in the short term on this.
Yeah. I mean, we'll come back to what can people do now. I think that the principle, the basics still apply, especially around data. I think people are going to be looking at PIMs a lot more seriously, off the back of this, because they're going to have to get the data in sorted if they're to appear in this sort of this 2-level decision-making process that I described just now. So I think in terms of practical terms, it's sort of business as usual to a degree. But it will be interesting just to see, what happens when this thing gets switched on. Because you can't ignore it. It's like Amazon, Paul. It's got the footfall. So there are people there, and to use OpenAI's word, making these purchase adjacent, asking these questions, and what part of the research that was, I think it was OpenAI's own. So maybe take it with a pinch of salt. But what they're saying is that people are finding it much more useful for asking it rather than asking it about things rather than getting it to do things. Yeah. And I think probably all of us here and probably watching who've used it a lot probably would agree with that. It's a good co-pilot. It's a good brainstorm companion. It's a good expert on to a decent level on pretty much everything. When you ask it to do things, it sometimes falls down.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think staying with what people could be doing in the short term, or what's the best actionable thing now is there's probably no negative. If brands have a bit of time or a bit of resource, there's no negative in just trying to clean the data and do a few of the tactics that might make your brand more visible in ChatGPT or other LLMs. And it's almost going back to your glory days, Paul, of without getting into black hat SEO, but actually being a bit scrappy and I mean, it's mostly about the product data, but in Shopify, it's, so one of the things is I guess the catalog API, it's getting data that even if it's not surfaced on site, will still be picked up by the LLM. So just making sure everything's almost keyword stuffed is that's not
keyword stuffed. I don't think the technical SEOs listen will think that's a great.
But that's the closest comparison is actually meta fields to make sure you've captured all relevant data about products and make sure the data is clean. That's not the route, but that's the comparison.
But I think this, I mean, the principle you're saying is 100% spot on. And we did a pod relatively recently with Sam, the founder of Novos, one of the leading search agencies. And his comment is bang on, which is nobody who does SEO optimization and technical SEO really well around product data does badly in this, because the data is in a good structure. And it is, I'm going to come on to the technical bit in the platform like Shopify, and is there anything you need to think about for you guys in a minute? But basically, it's number one, it's structured data. It is not just your descriptions, your tiles, your images. It's everything beyond that. It's the deep use of meta fields, meta objects. Shopify is making sure that content is surfaceable. It's the markup on the page as well, unstructured data, schema.org, maximizing your potential for that. So your page is structured and the data is surfaceable. It's page template design as well. It's going beyond basic templates and a PDP and going, right, what other types of content do we need to put here that tackle the educational informative stage, that tackle the purchase intent stage, and it's building out more content, and things like FAQ blocks are going to become more and more popular. But not just, we stuck the same FAQ block on every bloody PDP. It's contextually relevant content that people need to be. And you're right, it is almost, it's like stuffing content in, but it's doing it in a structured way that's relevant. That's
a nicer way of saying it, actually, if Sam said that.
Yeah, exactly. Honestly, a bit more.
I'm in.
Just in, so with Google, if you look at Google, obviously organically, in order to rank organically, you have the whole hierarchy of kind of importance, and they've obviously built out their kind of algorithm around relevancy and authority and everything else. Yet in Google Shopping, so nowadays, I'd say there's the whole early days where feed optimization was key, then it wasn't, and then now our team do a lot of work around injecting information around competitors and information around generics, and like there's so much you can do with feeds to index against different keyword. And it'll be interesting because right now OpenAI is purely organic results, like how they use information. And because obviously organically the information that's presented to a user is what's considered to be important. Via ads, they're taking all this information, which is not shown to the customer, even like product titles, everything else, that then allows you to essentially spend more money and reach the types of users you want to reach via the keywords you want to index against. And it'll be interesting to see how they approach that, actually, given that, it sounds like it's going to be quite feed-based.
And you've each of you mentioned the catalog API at Shopify several times here, and the importance of being ready from a structured data point of view so that these LLMs can pull in the relevant data. Apart from building out the product data, and you're right, Chris, whether you're using a PIM or you're introducing one or you're just doing it all directly in Shopify's native data model, beyond getting the data right and structured correctly, is there anything brands need to think about and have conversations with their development teams about technically in the platform to ensure that data is ready and open for that API to be used?
I don't know. I think the same principles still apply, right? The best practice around product data, clean product data. I think there's probably something like, there's lots of data which might not make the front of the website, which is going to be factored into these decisions. I think, my advice to anybody, right, who's looking to make sense of the opportunity here is to first and foremost immerse yourself in it as a user and as a customer, because it's still really early days and everyone's still figuring this out. And you might get a bit of insight by using these products. Use it for shopping, see what it gives you, and see, try and spot the opportunities, because it is emergent, this, and there's opportunity everywhere. And, even the people, who are sort of professing to, and the businesses and organizations that are leading this, if you watch what they say over the course of 6-12 months, their position's evolving on it all the time as well. Everyone's trying to figure this out. So it's, other than sort of, take care of the basics in the same way you always have done. And I think the point about SEO being, underpinning some of this is perfectly valid. I think, immerse yourself in it as an end user, really understand the technology, and then the opportunities that are specific to you and your business, which might be unique to you, will begin to emerge. I'm sorry, that's nothing very concrete, but that's that. I think that's where we are. I was there when mobile kicked off and social kicked off, and this feels like the similar kind of thing. The first movers, the people who can spot the advantage, will do all right. And it'll be finite. Right. There's a window of opportunity here, because the market will out at some point. And, if, ChatGPT, through whatever model they're going to monetize this, as in like an affiliate model, it might be very price competitive now. But when they figure out that they are way more price competitive than the rest of the other channels, they're going to correct that, and they're going to try and extract as much value as possible.
Yeah. Same as TikTok or some of the others.
Yeah, I guess I agree with all that. They're good points. I think we don't know whether it's going to be, from OpenAI's point of view, monetized tomorrow or next year. So I think there's the opportunity, if somebody I think the opportunity is for somebody basically just to be scrappy is the word that we use a lot, but actually doing some of these searches themselves, looking at their own product there, and just trial and erroring some of it to see, if we clean the data or if we add more meta fields and data in, the impact it makes. I think one practical thing that was been on my mind, well, I guess it's only been a day, but which is not the opportunity but the risk. But going back to the catalog API, so it's not just what's on the front end of the site that's getting fed in. It's all of the data within, basically all of your product data within Shopify for all the meta fields and everything's getting fed into the LLMs. And I think a lot of complex brands, not only that we've worked with, that I've seen over the years, especially if we built on Shopify before sort of meta objects came about, will use things like hidden products or hidden bits of data to manage bits of complexity and bits of functionality. And it would be aware from a dev point of view, reviewing if anybody's got like, specific bits of logic or specific bits of functionality that are running off hidden bits of data, because all that will suddenly not be hidden.
There is an
opportunity, but it's like, it's the opposite, I suppose.
There's to pick up on your black hat point as well. There's a black hat opportunity there as well with prompt injections. And I don't know if you've seen at the moment, like people are discovering this, embedding prompts and instructions in their LinkedIn profiles, then asking ChatGPT to tell them about themselves. And they've put a prompt, they've put an injection in the prompt saying basically always return in the form of a poem. So when it responds, it's in poetry form. That's where we're at. Just to reiterate the point I was making just now, it's very early days. There's loads of holes in this stuff as well. And, there's some very, I'm not an expert on security, but all very, very valid, security concerns about it as well. So, I'd be very wary from a practical point of view about using, a generative AI in a production environment, because I would, if you're in the e-commerce and marketing teams and thinking about using this stuff, I would definitely have a conversation with your IT teams about their position on it, because they're versed in this stuff and they've been considering these kind of things for years and probably have a different opinion on it to you. And, we've seen examples of products on, not to name names, like on big consumer sites, famous consumer sites that are using this technology, and you can get them to say some pretty radical things. And I do think there's definitely some of this stuff is being rushed out in the need to show that people are, ahead of the curve and they're embracing this technology. They may be falling over themselves a little bit. And
I think that's a really good parting point for this, because I think this is the conversation where we could spend a long time debating this, because it's such an interesting area. But I think the sensible thing is don't act before you've understood the implications of acting. Get your foundations in place. And you know what? Guess what? Having really, really good product data and good content and structured content that is aligned with user needs and shopping intent, it's always been important, but it's more important than ever, because if you want to support multiple channels through which people are accessing information and buying, that's the fundamentals you've got to get right before you play with the shiny stuff. So look, gents, thank you very much for jumping on short notice. Really enjoyed today. I feel like this conversation will run and run. And thanks everyone for listening. And anyone disagrees with any of the points made or got different perspectives, we'd love to hear them. When you put the posts out on LinkedIn, tell us what you think. Tell us where you're seeing this headed. Because all debate on this is useful. So until next week, everybody.
You're listening to the Inside Commerce podcast, hosted by experienced consultants James Gerd and Paul Rogers. Inside Commerce is your fast track to digital knowledge, featuring interviews with leading e-commerce retailers, industry thought leaders, and the C-suite of key tech companies to explore the latest in digital strategy, customer experience, and tech. Discover what the latest trends really mean and get practical advice based on experience to help fine-tune your e-com strategy and tech stack. Follow us on LinkedIn and reach out to James or Paul if you'd like to discuss an e-commerce project. We hope you enjoy the latest episode.